Hey guys, it's Paul from Montana. I have here a 1996 SkiDoo triple Rotax 600 Formula 3 snowmobile. Long track. I think it's got a pretty nice track. Looks like maybe 1.5-inch paddles or something on it. I bought this snowmobile for $100 with the title, and it's kind of beat. The guy I bought it from had parked it, and he said he wasn't really sure what was wrong with it. It didn't sound that good. So, you know, I like a challenge. I'm not sure $100 was worth it now that I see what's wrong with it, but I'm going to keep rolling with this and try to get it back on the snow. I'm pretty far into this. As you can see, I've got the engine out of it already. The first thing I did was fired it up. It did run actually pretty well, putting gas in the cylinders. It didn't run on carburetors because they were pretty gummed up, so I took them out and I've got them all apart here, and they're actually ready to go back together. Everything's cleaned up and ready to go back together. And I bought new intake flanges for it too. The other ones had quite a few cracks on them, like on where you see that radius kind of shiny part right there. Hindsight, that might have been kind of a, not something that really needed to happen, because once I finally got those flanges off there and looked inside of them, cracks didn't really go all the way through. So I guess a learning experience for somebody working on a snowmobile like this is, if your flanges have cracks in them like that, they might be fine. I don't think I'd replace them. And one of the problems that happened when I took those flanges off is the bolts were very frozen up on the intake here. I got all of them out except 2 snapped off. So I'm in the process of I'm going to grind those flat and start drilling them from the center out. Try an easy out first, and if that doesn't work, I'll just keep drilling up and retap them. I think they're 5mm, 0.8 pitch. So you're probably wondering, well, what really was wrong with this machine outside of lack of maintenance on carburetors? It had a bad crank bearing. Here's the bearing right here. There's supposed to be balls all the way around that thing. Well, it's how I figured that out was, my first clue was the clutch, primary clutch, had some interesting wear on it. Right there you see that big score where it's just been worn, back into the aluminum casting. And right away I'm thinking, well, either something's out of balance in the clutch, or we've got an issue with the crank. So I pulled the clutch off, pulled this flange pulley off, and meanwhile I ordered another clutch, used one off eBay that's in pretty decent shape. When I put this all back together, I'll obviously put that new clutch set on there. I'm going to tear it apart and rebuild it too, at least put new clutch buttons on there. And so I guess this is how I figured this out, was I had the engine out of it sitting here, and I grabbed the pulley and I spun it, and I could hear what sounded like metal balls bouncing together like this. I could hear that inside the crank, and I could tell that it was on this side of the crank. So I took the water pump off this side, and I took the electrical housing off, split the case, and sure enough, bad bearing. So I was pretty happy with that. It's not a very difficult thing to fix. The bearings aren't that expensive. So I'm going to put a new bearing on this engine and crankcase sealer, put it all back together, and clean up the reed valves real good, and stick it back in. This is a budget project. I'm trying to keep it under, $300-400 hopefully. I'm already kind of there with parts, but I don't think I have to really buy anything else. It needs a lot of cleanup work. I'm going to do some, pretty major cleanup before I put it back together. But all in all, I think it's worth it. I'm not some avid snowmobiler. I don't need, anything too crazy to get out there that's new. This is good for me. Probably ride 3 times a year. and it's fun. I love working on stuff like this. So if I get this running good, you know, and really reliable, then I'll go ahead and do some more cosmetic stuff. I'll probably pull the seat off of it and clean the tunnel up really good, and maybe throw some paint on that just to make it look fresh and new. I've got grips coming for it, just kind of basic stuff to make it look nice. What else can I say? I don't know. I will do a second part to this video when I get it all back together, and I will show you what I got. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, so I've got the engine out of this SkiDoo 600 triple, and I noticed the run out on the clutch side is not very good, so I'm going to take a whack at fixing this. But what I've done here is I've set up an indicator using crankcase bolts and a couple standoffs and a piece of metal. So I've got original crankcase bolts going down, these standoffs, this piece of metal coming out, and then I mounted a indicator gauge right at 90 degrees on here, so I can, you know where I need to target straightening this thing out. And obviously this is what killed the bearings and the clutch. But if you watch this gauge, sorry my camera's not all that great, you're going to see about a 5/1000 swing. See, there's 0, there's -5, 0, +5 or 6, 0, -5, 0, +5. So I'm going to find that position right there where it's, you know, trying to go back towards the gauge, find that maximum position, and I'm going to make a little turnbuckle out of a nut and a bolt, stick it in the counterbalance right here, try to spread it until I get a run out of perfect would be nice, but I'm hoping for a couple thousandths. I've seen where guys put these on a rack too, put the crankshaft on a rack, and then they actually tap it or whack it with like a brass hammer until they get it in. I don't really have that option because this engine's still assembled. You know, if I hit on this portion here with the brass hammer, it's just going to probably damage the crankcase. You just can't do it like that. It has to be out of there, or else it won't work. Because putting a turnbuckle in here is the least damaging way you can do it, and you have a lot of control over it. I've never done it, but I don't think it's too bad. I don't think it's going to be too bad, and I was happy to see the run out was only, you know, 5/1000 each way. I don't think that's going to be hard to get that out. Alright, well, there it is. I'll do another video when I get it all straightened out. Okay, I've got this thing trued up about the best that I can. Watch that needle. Pretty good. I kind of quit when I got below 2/1000, so basically it runs out less than 1/1000 in one direction and 1/1000 in another direction for a total of probably 3/4 of a 1/1000. And how I did it was I made a little nut thing that I stuck in there, like a turnbuckle nut. And it did pretty good. I mean, it took probably 3 or 4 thousandths out of this thing, out of the run out. But then I just ran out of power with it. It wasn't strong enough to do the job. So then I resorted to a wedge. I put cloth in here in case any debris fell down, and I stuck a wedge in here and gave it a few whacks with a sledgehammer, and before you know it, this thing was in pretty good. So It's just a matter of figuring out where the wedge needs to go in relationship to which side which side it's coming towards. It's pretty easy once you go with it and start working with it. Anyhow, I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm going to put this thing back together. Okay, so this thing's probably just a couple, 3 hours out of being done. So what I did here is I've got the engine back in it. I had to braze one of the exhaust flanges. It looked like it was going to leak. That had a cracked weld, and then I flattened out the back end of it by putting a piece of paper on a real flat surface. You could use like glass or something, and then you rotate it in a kind of a circular motion until it flattens out. Everything went real good. When I took the rave valves out, I broke a bolt off. Those are the dangers of working with old stuff like this. It seems like you're always finding a bolt here and there that needs to be drilled out and tapped out. It's just the nature of the beast. There's really no way around it. See, torquing the bolts on here, obviously I torqued the whole crankcase back together. That went good. The flywheel over there on the other side, I have the rope starter cover over it, but the flywheel was kind of a trick because it's like 92 foot-pounds, I think. So I'm sure they make a tool to hold it, but I made my own very simple little tool, 2 bolt holes, bolt onto the flywheel, and then you could put a 1/2 inch bar on there and hang on to it, and it actually torqued quite easily with that on there. And then of course the clutch side is 70 foot-pounds, which is smaller than 90, so I just used the flywheel nut to hold that, and I torqued that back on there. Carburetor, flanges, coils, everything's back on it. I've got everything tagged, so I know how to hook it back up. So the next step here for me is to put the carbs on and well, first I'm going to straighten out the engine. And it's how you do that is you open up your secondary clutch and you put a straight bar in it. I have a precision ground piece of metal here, and you basically sandwich a bar back in the secondary clutch, and then you take measurements to your primary clutch. Specs are plus or minus 20 thousandths, which if you work in machine world, that's a lot. So I mean, I'm sure I can do better than that. Then you just keep moving the engine around till you get it, and then you torque it. Tighten all the engine mount bolts. And then last but not least, don't forget to tighten this little turnbuckle thing that goes against that foot against the engine. I'm going to look it up in the manual, but I don't think you want that very tight. I think you just do it till it contacts, and then maybe 1/8 of a turn or something, just to keep the torque of the engine, so it's not, getting the clutches from being too out of being straight with one another. Other than that, that's about it. I hope I can fire this thing up later today or tomorrow and show you what I got. The pipe's got to go back on, of course. That's super easy. That's like the 10-minute job of all this stuff. So there you have it. I'll hopefully have 1 or 2 more videos here of this thing. Alright guys, I got this thing running. It took very little, a couple pulls, and she fired right up. I'll do a little video later when I get it all 100% ready, but I had an issue with fuel grumps leaking pretty bad, so I just wanted to do a quick video on how I get the gas out of here. There's probably other ways to do it, but I just disconnect the fuel line coming out of the tank, and I duct tape like a little fitting on here with some fuel line on it, so it's nice and sealed up. And then just take an air compressor and put a little compressed air in the top of that, and your fuel comes out really, really fast right into your tank. No fuss, no muss. So that's it. This thing ran great. It was popping wheelies. We don't have much snow, so I'm going to take it up high. But it ran fantastic. Really exciting.